The text message arrived at 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday, right as I was hanging a new piece by Devin Matthews, this brilliant 26-year-old artist whose work was about to change everything for my gallery. I'm done pretending we're happy. Tiffany and I are flying to Dubai tonight. Already cleaned out our savings. Consider it my freedom fee. Don't embarrass yourself trying to stop me. My hands didn't shake as I read it. My voice didn't waver as I continued discussing the painting's composition with Mrs. Chin, one of my most important collectors. The only sign that my husband of 15 years had just nuked our marriage via text was the slight smile that crossed my lips, because what Marcus didn't know was that I'd been waiting for this exact moment for 6 months. My name is Zara Williams, and at 41, I just received what might be the most arrogant goodbye in history. But while Marcus was probably celebrating his grand exit with his 22-year-old social media influencer girlfriend, imagining me crying over his betrayal, I was calmly finishing up the most successful art opening in my gallery's 8-year history. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's being 10 steps ahead. If you've ever felt underestimated, if someone has ever assumed you'd crumble without them, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next is going to restore your faith in preparation over desperation. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before that text message changed everything. Ancestral Voices Gallery wasn't just my business, it was my mission. For 8 years, I'd built it from a single room in Atlanta's Arts District into the most respected showcase for emerging Black artists in the Southeast. We'd launched careers, sold million-dollar pieces, and created a community where art wasn't just decoration, it was legacy. But to Marcus, my real estate agent husband, it was always just my little art hobby. He'd roll his eyes when I'd work late preparing for openings, dismiss my artist friends as pretentious, and constantly suggest I scale back to focus more on our marriage. What he never understood was that Ancestral Voices wasn't just a gallery. It was my insurance policy, my independence, my proof that I could build something lasting while he was busy selling other people's dreams. I'm methodical by nature. It's what made me successful in the art world, where one wrong acquisition can cost you years of reputation. I research every artist, document every transaction, keep meticulous records of every business decision. Marcus used to tease me about my obsessive filing system, my separate business accounts, my insistence on keeping detailed records of everything. He called it paranoia. I called it protection. The irony is that the same attention to detail that made him roll his eyes would be exactly what saved me when he decided to trade me in for a younger model. That Thursday evening started like any other opening night. Devin's exhibition, Generational Wealth, featured paintings that explored themes of legacy and inheritance in Black families. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Here I was, building something to pass down, while my husband was planning to tear it all apart. The gallery was packed. Atlanta's art elite mingled with young collectors, everyone discussing Devin's bold use of color and texture. I was in my element, moving through the crowd in my black designer dress, one I'd bought with my separate business account, though Marcus didn't know I had one yet. My phone buzzed at 7:43. I glanced at it while nodding to something Mrs. Chin was saying about the emotional depth in Devin's work. The message from Marcus appeared on my lock screen, and I felt nothing. No shock, no devastation, no panic. Just a cool sense of recognition, like when you finally see the artist's signature in the corner of a painting you've been studying. I'm done pretending we're happy. Tiffany and I are flying to Dubai tonight. Already cleaned out our savings. Consider it my freedom fee. Don't embarrass yourself trying to stop me. Tiffany. The 22-year-old social media manager who'd been commenting hearts on all his Instagram posts for months. The same girl who'd giggled through our last company barbecue, asking Marcus about his success secrets while touching his arm just a little too long. I'd watched her obvious flirtation with the same detached interest I'd used to observe a predictable artistic technique. Mrs. Williams, are you all right? Mrs. Chin asked, noticing I'd gone quiet. "Perfect," I replied, slipping my phone back into my clutch. Just thinking about how sometimes things end exactly when they're supposed to. She looked puzzled, but I just smiled and guided her toward another piece. Because what Marcus didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that this wasn't the first time I'd seen that text. Not the exact words, but the sentiment. I'd been preparing for this conversation since January, when I'd found the receipt for jewelry I'd never received, tucked in his jacket pocket after Valentine's Day. But before I tell you about my preparation, let me share what happened next, because Marcus's arrogance was just getting started. The second text arrived 20 minutes later, while I was giving a brief speech about Devon's artistic vision. "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you figure out something smaller. And I know the gallery means a lot to you, so we can work out fair payment for my half when I get back." I actually paused mid-sentence and laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not a hurt laugh, but genuine amusement. Because Marcus had just revealed exactly how little he understood about property law, business ownership, and most importantly, his wife. Devon caught my eye from across the room, concerned. I winked at him and continued my speech about legacy and preparation, my voice steady, my message clear. Sometimes, I told the crowd, the most powerful art comes from the most challenging moments. When someone tries to diminish your vision, that's when you discover how strong your foundation really is. The applause was thunderous. And my phone buzzed again. What Marcus failed to realize, what he never could have imagined in his most paranoid moments, was that I'd been documenting his midlife crisis since it began. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I'm thorough. And thoroughness, as any successful gallery owner will tell you, is the difference between building something lasting and watching it crumble. It started in January, 6 months before his dramatic Dubai announcement. Marcus had always been predictable. Same routine, same restaurants, same complaints about his commission checks. But suddenly, there were changes. Small ones at first. New cologne that I didn't recognize. Gym membership he'd never mentioned wanting. Designer shirts that cost more than he'd ever spent on himself before. The first real red flag was Valentine's Day. I'd found a receipt in his jacket pocket, not snooping, just checking for business cards like I always did before sending clothes to the cleaner. Cartier jewelry, $3,200, purchased February 13th. I'd received drugstore flowers and dinner at Applebee's. That night, while Marcus slept, I did what I always do when something doesn't add up in my business. I investigated. His credit card statements, which came to our shared email, showed a pattern I recognized from authentication work I'd done on questionable art pieces. Small inconsistencies that, when viewed together, revealed a much larger picture. Hotel charges on nights he claimed to be showing houses. Restaurant bills for two when he said he was working late. Charges at Victoria's Secret when my birthday had passed months ago. Each piece of evidence carefully screenshot and filed away, dated and organized like any important business document. By March, I'd opened a separate account at a different bank. Not to hide money, I'm not vindictive, but to protect what I'd built. The gallery's profits, my speaker fees from business conferences, the consulting income from helping other entrepreneurs protect their assets, all of it quietly moved to an account that Marcus didn't know existed. In April, when he suggested we simplify our finances by combining everything into one joint account, I agreed cheerfully. What he didn't know was that I was moving all my real assets while leaving just enough in our shared accounts to avoid suspicion. About 2 months' worth of regular deposits, enough to keep him from getting curious, not enough to fund his fantasy escape. I called my lawyer in May. Amara Jackson, the smartest business attorney in Atlanta, someone who'd helped me structure the gallery's ownership to protect it from exactly this kind of situation. I need to understand my options, I told her, spreading out 6 months of evidence across her conference table. My husband is planning something, and I want to be ready. Amara reviewed everything with the same careful attention I'd used to authenticate a potential acquisition. The hotel receipts, the credit card charges, the sudden changes in behavior, even screenshots of Tiffany's increasingly bold social media comments on his posts. "You're building a solid case for financial misconduct," she said. "But more importantly, your business assets are completely protected. The gallery, the building lease, all your intellectual property, it's all in your name or your business entity. He has no claim to any of it." That's when I realized Marcus had made his first crucial mistake. For years, he'd complained about my obsessive insistence on keeping business and personal finances separate. He'd mocked my detailed record-keeping, my separate accounts, my refusal to add his name to the gallery's ownership documents. He thought I was being paranoid or controlling. Actually, I was being smart. By June, I was ready for whatever he was planning. Every asset protected, every suspicious transaction documented, every piece of evidence organized in folders that would make any forensic accountant proud. When his behavior escalated, coming home later, being more secretive with his phone, suddenly interested in investment opportunities that required large cash deposits, I just added each red flag to my growing file. The beautiful irony is that Marcus thought he was so clever, so careful in his planning. But he was planning his escape from someone he'd completely underestimated. While he was plotting his Dubai getaway with a girl young enough to be his daughter, I was 3 steps ahead, building a case that would make his lawyer weep. If you're enjoying watching karma prepare to strike back, smash that like button. Because what Marcus did next proves that arrogance really is the most expensive mistake you can make. Marcus's third text arrived at 9:15 p.m., just as I was saying goodbye to the last guests from Devon's opening. The gallery was quiet now, just me and the paintings, and I felt more at peace than I had in months. By the way, used our joint card to book the flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift, LOL. At least you'll have your paintings to keep you company at your age. I actually laughed out loud in the empty gallery. Not just because of his casual admission to credit card fraud, but because he just handed me the perfect final piece of evidence I needed. I screenshot that message and immediately forwarded it to Amara with a simple note: "It's time." Her response came back in minutes: "Papers are ready. I'll file first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Dubai?" "No rush," I typed back. "Let him think he's won first." But before I let Marcus enjoy his moment of imagined triumph, I had a phone call to make. You see, while Marcus was busy planning his escape, he'd forgotten one crucial detail about joint credit cards. Both account holders can report fraudulent charges. "Thank you for calling Atlanta First National. This is Jessica speaking." "Hi Jessica, I need to report fraudulent charges on my account and cancel a card immediately." "Of course, ma'am. Can you identify the charges in question?" 2 first-class tickets to Dubai, booked today. Hotel charges at the Burj Al Arab. And I need to remove my husband as an authorized user. I have text messages where he admits to using our joint card to book travel with his girlfriend after emptying our bank account. The satisfaction in Jessica's voice was barely concealed. "I'll be happy to cancel those charges immediately, ma'am. Would you like me to flag any future attempts to use the card?" While I was on hold, waiting for the charges to be reversed, another text came through from Marcus. "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller. I know this must be hard at your age, but at least you have your art hobby to keep you busy." My art hobby? The gallery that had been featured in Architectural Digest last month. The business that generated more income than his real estate career. The hobby that employed 12 people and had a waiting list of artists desperate to show their work. I forwarded that text to Amara too, then called her directly. "Zara, these messages are gifts," she said, and I could hear her typing in the background. "He's admitting to premeditation, documenting his own financial misconduct, and providing evidence of his intent to defraud. Most cheating spouses try to hide their tracks. Your husband is building our case for us." "There's more," I said, and told her about the credit card cancellations. "Perfect. So tomorrow morning, Marcus and his girlfriend will arrive at the airport to find their tickets have been canceled, their hotel reservation is void, and their romantic getaway has turned into a very expensive lesson in consequences. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because my marriage was over. I'd processed that grief weeks ago when I'd finally accepted what the evidence was telling me. I slept well because I'd done everything right. Every asset protected, every legal requirement met, every piece of evidence properly documented and filed. Meanwhile, Marcus was probably lying awake next to his 22-year-old girlfriend, congratulating himself on his clever escape plan, imagining me crying into my pillow, assuming I'd be too devastated to function without him. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Friday morning brought a series of increasingly frantic texts, 7:23 a.m. What the hell did you do to our credit card? The airline won't honor our tickets. 7:41 a.m. The hotel canceled our reservation. This is vindictive even for you. 8:15 a.m. I know you're reading these. Stop being petty and fix this. 8:52 a.m. Fine, be childish. I'll use my personal cards. 9:33 a.m. Why are my cards maxed out? That last one made me smile as I unlocked the gallery for what would be one of our busiest days ever. Because while Marcus had been so focused on his grand romantic gesture, he'd forgotten that his investment opportunities and designer wardrobe upgrades had consequences. Those mysterious cash deposits he'd been making, the expensive dinners, the jewelry for girlfriends, it all adds up. By 10 a.m., according to my sources at his real estate office, the art world is small and gossip travels fast. Marcus and Tiffany were stranded at the airport, their Dubai dreams temporarily derailed. His personal credit cards, maxed out from months of financing his midlife crisis, couldn't cover 2 last-minute first-class tickets to anywhere, much less one of the world's most expensive destinations. Around noon, his mother called. Zara, dear, Marcus told us everything about how you've been controlling and distant. He says you're being vindictive now, causing problems with his travel plans just because he's finally found happiness. I put Mrs. Johnson on speaker while I arranged a new window display, a piece by Keisha Williams about resilience and renewal. Did he mention emptying our joint account and charging tickets for him and his girlfriend on our credit card, Mrs. Johnson? Silence. Then, well, he said you'd left him no choice, that you'd been cold and... Mrs. Johnson, I have his text messages. Would you like me to read you the one where he bragged about taking our money, or maybe the one where he called my gallery a hobby and mocked my age? Another pause. He did seem rather cruel in that message. I told him that wasn't appropriate. I appreciate the call, Mrs. Johnson. I've always respected you. But my lawyer has advised minimal contact with Marcus's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Goodbye, Mrs. Johnson. By evening, the Atlanta art community's WhatsApp groups were buzzing with gossip. Apparently, Marcus and Tiffany had been spotted at a budget inn near the airport, their Miami dreams indefinitely postponed. His realtor colleagues were sharing stories about his recent erratic behavior, his missed appointments, his increasingly desperate attempts to close deals that would generate quick cash. But the best news came from Amara, emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in an excellent position to freeze all remaining assets. Oh, and Zara? His girlfriend's Instagram story from today is illuminating. I looked up Tiffany's profile. Her latest post, from the budget in parking lot, was a picture of her suitcase with the caption, "When your Dubai plans get canceled because some people can't handle the truth #drama-free #moving on 24 hours into his grand escape." And even his 22-year-old girlfriend was already distancing herself from the chaos Marcus had created. Comment below if you've ever watched someone's arrogance backfire this spectacularly, because Marcus's week was about to get so much worse. Monday morning's emergency hearing was everything I could have hoped for. Marcus showed up in his new young wardrobe, designer jeans that were too tight for his 45-year-old frame, a blazer that screamed midlife crisis, sneakers that probably cost more than most people's rent. Tiffany waited outside in the hallway, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting, scrolling through her phone like she was waiting for a coffee order instead of watching her older boyfriend's life implode. I, on the other hand, had dressed like the successful businesswoman I was. Conservative black suit, minimal jewelry, my leather portfolio containing 6 months of meticulously organized evidence. I looked like someone who belonged in a courtroom, someone who took legal proceedings seriously. My lawyer, Amara, presented our case methodically. Marcus's gleeful text about emptying our account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of hidden expenses, each piece carefully collected over months of patient observation. Your Honor, Mrs. Williams didn't act vindicatively. She acted prudently. She protected her separate assets and maintained detailed records of her husband's increasingly suspicious behavior. That's not vindictive, that's smart business. Marcus's hastily hired lawyer, clearly someone he'd found over the weekend, attempted damage control. Your Honor, my client admits to some rash decisions, but Mrs. Williams's actions have been calculating and punitive. Calculating, the judge raised an eyebrow. You mean prudent? Mr. Johnson, your client admitted via text message to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund a vacation with his girlfriend. Are you seriously arguing that his wife's decision to protect her assets from fraud was inappropriate? I watched Marcus's face as reality began to sink in. This wasn't going to be the quick, clean divorce he'd imagined. He thought he could take half of everything I'd built, use our shared credit to finance his new life, and leave me scrambling to rebuild at 41. Instead, he was discovering that his controlling wife had been building legal walls he'd never even noticed. Mr. Johnson, the judge continued, addressing Marcus directly, you've admitted to deliberately emptying a joint account and using shared credit cards to fund travel with your girlfriend. Do you deny this? Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his expensive sneakers squeaking against the courtroom floor. I was just trying to make a clean break, Your Honor. The marriage was over anyway. By committing financial fraud? The judge's tone was ice cold. And now you're claiming rights to property that documentation clearly shows belongs separately to your wife? The business grew during our marriage, Marcus's lawyer tried again. My client is entitled to marital assets. The business, Amara interrupted smoothly, was established before the marriage, and Mrs. Williams maintained strict separation of business and personal finances throughout their relationship. We have documentation of every penny invested and earned, every business decision made independently of marital funds. She opened her first folder, one of 6 she'd brought. Your Honor, these are the incorporation papers for Ancestral Voices Gallery, filed 3 years before the marriage. This is the documentation showing Mrs. Williams's separate business accounts, maintained throughout the marriage. These are the records showing that no marital funds were ever invested in the business, and no business profits were ever commingled with marital assets. Marcus's lawyer looked like he was drowning. His client had clearly misrepresented the situation, probably told him some story about a wife who'd be too emotional to organize proper legal defense. Furthermore, Amara continued, we have evidence that Mr. Johnson repeatedly dismissed his wife's business as a hobby and actively discouraged her professional development. These text messages show his attitude toward her work. She read several of his messages aloud, including his dismissive comments about my little art hobby and his assumption that the gallery barely breaks even. The contrast between his public dismissal and his current attempt to claim half the profits was stark. The judge reviewed my documentation with the thoroughness I appreciated in a fellow professional. The separate property papers for the gallery building, which I owned, not rented. The business incorporation documents. The careful separation of all business and personal finances that Marcus had complained about for years. Mr. Johnson, the judge said finally, The evidence shows that your wife maintained completely separate business interests throughout your marriage, as is her legal right. Your admitted financial misconduct has voided any claim you might have had to shared marital assets. The court orders all joint accounts frozen pending final dissolution, and you are required to restore any funds improperly removed within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Marcus protested, his voice rising. We spent it on. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. The judge cut him off. The court takes a very dim view of using shared credit cards to fund romantic vacations with third parties. Outside the courthouse, I could hear Tiffany asking Marcus about their Miami plans. Apparently, Dubai was off the table, but she was hoping for some kind of vacation consolation prize. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble floor, heading back to the business he'd never understood or respected. That afternoon brought news that Marcus's real estate license was under investigation. Apparently, his recent financial irregularities had raised red flags with his brokerage, and several clients had complained about missed appointments and unprofessional behavior. The promotion he'd been expecting, the one he'd told Tiffany was definitely coming, went to a colleague who didn't have a history of workplace relationships with subordinates. My phone buzzed with a text from Amara. His girlfriend just changed her Instagram status to single and posted about learning from toxic relationships. Apparently, sharing a budget in room with a middle-aged man having a public breakdown isn't as glamorous as she imagined. I smiled, thinking about Marcus's assumption that I'd be the one falling apart, that his dramatic exit would leave me devastated and helpless. Instead, I was planning the gallery's expansion into Nashville, reviewing applications from artists wanting to join our roster, and fielding calls from reporters who wanted to feature our upcoming exhibition. Subscribe for more stories where preparation beats desperation, because Marcus's downward spiral was just getting started. The final divorce hearing, 3 months later, painted a very different picture from the triumphant escape Marcus had originally planned. Gone was his cocky attitude, replaced by barely concealed panic. Tiffany was noticeably absent. She'd moved on to a new relationship with someone her own age who actually had money to spend on her Instagram lifestyle. Marcus had aged visibly in those 3 months. The tight clothes looked ridiculous now, emphasizing his stress weight gain rather than his attempts to look younger. His expensive sneakers had been replaced with discount shoes, and his designer blazer showed signs of repeated wear without professional cleaning. His mother sat in the gallery behind him, her face a mask of disappointment. Mrs. Johnson had visited my gallery twice since our phone call, once to apologize and once to buy a piece for her living room. I didn't raise him to treat people this way, she'd told me quietly. I'm ashamed of what he's become. Amara had prepared for this hearing like an art curator preparing for a major exhibition, every piece of evidence perfectly placed, every argument carefully structured, every possible objection anticipated. She'd even brought enlarged printouts of Marcus's most incriminating text messages, displayed on easels like the artwork they resembled in their perfect capture of human arrogance. Your Honor, Marcus's lawyer made one final attempt. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the growth of his wife's business through moral support and encouragement. Moral support? Amara interrupted, gesturing to the text message displays. Like these messages calling Mrs. Williams's gallery her little art hobby? Or this social media post where he described her business as something that barely breaks even? Or perhaps this text where he told her to scale back her professional commitments to focus on their marriage. She walked over to another easel. Or maybe this moral support, where he told her she was not getting any younger and should be grateful for his attention? The judge had clearly seen enough. Mr. Johnson, the evidence shows not only did you fail to support your wife's business endeavors, you actively undermined and dismissed them. Your claim to any portion of assets you repeatedly characterized as worthless is both legally unfounded and morally questionable. I watched Marcus's face as the full weight of his situation finally hit him. He'd gambled everything on his assumption that I'd be too devastated by his betrayal to fight back effectively. He'd imagined me begging him to return, agreeing to split everything just to avoid conflict. Instead, he was sitting in a courtroom, broke and alone, watching his wife's lawyer systematically demolish every assumption he'd made about our relationship. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The court notes that Mr. Johnson's financial misconduct extends beyond the marriage. Evidence shows he maxed out personal credit cards funding extramarital activities, attempted to use shared credit for unauthorized travel, and emptied joint accounts without notice. These actions demonstrate a pattern of financial irresponsibility that supports Mrs. Williams's decision to maintain separate assets." The final settlement reflected my careful planning. I kept my house, which had been in my family for generations, my business, which Marcus had never legally been part of, and my separate assets, which he'd never known existed. Marcus got his personal possessions, his car, worth less than he owed on it, and the crushing weight of his own poor decisions. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we left the courthouse, his voice barely controlled. "I'll have to move back in with my mother. I can't afford rent on my commission now." "No, Marcus," I replied calmly, adjusting my leather portfolio. "You destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." His mother was waiting outside, keys in hand, ready to drive her 45-year-old son to his new home in her basement. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd mocked my age was now dependent on his elderly mother for shelter, while I continued running my successful business empire. "You planned this all along," he accused, desperation creeping into his voice. "You knew this would happen." "No, Marcus. I just paid attention. And unlike you, I understood the value of keeping good records." Mrs. Johnson stepped between us before he could respond. "That's enough, Marcus. You've embarrassed yourself enough already." She looked at me with something approaching respect. "I'm sorry, Zara. For all of it." As they walked away, I heard her begin what sounded like a lecture that was 15 years overdue. "Honestly, what were you thinking? A 22-year-old? Emptying bank accounts? Sending those horrible text messages?" I watched them disappear into the parking garage, feeling nothing but relief. Marcus had thought he was writing the ending to our story with that cruel text message about Dubai and his freedom fee. Instead, he'd merely set my carefully laid plans in motion. My phone buzzed, not with texts from Marcus this time, but with notifications about new orders from the gallery's website, interview requests from business magazines, and speaking opportunities at entrepreneurship conferences. Life was moving forward, just not in the direction he'd imagined. Like this video if you believe in the power of preparation, because the aftermath of Marcus's great escape was about to prove that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 2 years after Marcus's cruel text message about his Dubai escape and his freedom fee, I received an invitation to speak at the National Women's Business Conference. The topic wasn't divorce or betrayal, it was about building and protecting a successful enterprise. My story had evolved from cautionary tale to inspiration. Ancestral Voices Gallery had grown to 4 locations across the Southeast. The little art hobby Marcus had dismissed now employed 43 people and had been featured in Art in America, Architectural Digest, and Forbes as one of the fastest-growing gallery chains in the country. We'd launched the careers of over 100 artists, sold pieces to major museums, and created a foundation that provided grants to emerging Black artists. During the conference Q&A, a young woman raised her hand. "My business partner says I'm being paranoid about keeping separate accounts and detailed records. He says partnership means sharing everything, trusting completely. What would you tell someone in my position?" I smiled, thinking of Marcus's identical arguments years earlier. "Trust your instincts. Protection isn't paranoia, it's professional responsibility." The same partner who criticizes your careful record-keeping today might try to claim credit for your success tomorrow. Document everything, separate everything, and never apologize for protecting what you've built. The applause was thunderous, and afterwards, dozens of women approached me with their own stories of partnerships gone wrong, of businesses nearly lost to divorce or betrayal, of the importance of maintaining independence even within committed relationships. Through the local business network, I occasionally heard updates about Marcus's situation. He'd finally found work at a smaller real estate agency, taking a significant pay cut from his previous position. His dating profile, according to mutual acquaintances, still described him as young at heart, though the photos were clearly outdated and the responses apparently sparse. He'd tried reaching out a few times over the years, LinkedIn connection requests I ignored, emails to the gallery's general address that my assistant filtered out, even a few attempts to contact me through his mother. Each message followed the same pattern: initial hostility, followed by bargaining, ending with attempts at manipulation. "You've ruined my reputation in this city," one email claimed. "No one will work with me because of the lies you've spread." I'd never spoken publicly about our divorce, never shared details of his behavior, never tried to damage his professional reputation. His problems were entirely self-created, the natural consequences of his choices becoming public through his own actions. The gallery had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their light for insecure partners. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I always emphasized the same principles that had saved me: maintain your independence, document everything, trust your instincts, and never let anyone convince you that preparation is paranoia. Last month, Tiffany, now 25 and married to someone her own age, actually visited the gallery. She was pregnant, glowing with genuine happiness, a far cry from the Instagram-obsessed girl who'd helped Marcus try to destroy my marriage. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly, studying one of Devon's newer pieces. "I believed everything he told me about how you were controlling, how you didn't support his dreams, how you were holding him back from his potential." I continued arranging a display of jewelry by local artists, not interrupting her confession. After 2 weeks of living with him in my studio apartment, she continued, "I understood what you meant about the difference between dreams and delusions. Everything was going to work out once his investments paid off, once he got that promotion, once his ex-wife stopped being vindictive. There was always someone else to blame for his problems." "I'm glad you figured that out," I said genuinely. "How's married life treating you?" She smiled, touching her belly. "We have student loans and a small apartment, but we're building something real together. No secret credit cards, no mysterious expenses, no blaming each other for problems we create ourselves." After she left, my assistant Keisha shook her head in amazement. The audacity of some people, thinking they can just walk back into your life with an apology. "Actually," I said, "I respect her for that. It takes courage to admit you were wrong, especially when you were part of someone else's cruel plan." She learned from her mistakes, grew up, and chose better. That's what mature people do. The 5-year anniversary celebration of Ancestral Voices was held at our original location, now the flagship store of what had become a respected art institution. The space had been transformed from my original little shop into a sophisticated gallery that regularly hosted Atlanta's cultural elite. Marcus's mother attended, though I hadn't sent her an invitation. She'd become a regular customer over the years, and we developed a cordial relationship based on our shared appreciation for art and her obvious remorse about her son's behavior. "I saw Marcus last week," she mentioned during the reception, smoothing her designer dress, one she'd bought from my jewelry section. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had if things had been different." I thought about that text message, his casual cruelty, his assumption that I would crumble without him. "What did you tell him?" "The same thing I've been telling him for 5 years. He didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away with his own choices." She paused, watching the elegant crowd appreciate the art Marcus had never understood. "You know what the real tragedy is? He could have shared in all this success if he'd just supported you instead of resenting you." If he'd celebrated your achievements instead of feeling threatened by them. I looked around the gallery, at the successful artists whose careers we'd launched, the collectors who trusted our expertise, the young entrepreneurs who sought our mentorship, the community we'd built around the celebration of Black artistic excellence. His loss, I said simply. The young salesperson I'd hired last month, coincidentally also named Tiffany, approached with a question about our new artist residency program. As I explained the application process, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the gallery window, not a woman who'd been broken by betrayal, but one who'd been strengthened by preparation. Marcus had intended his cruel text message to be an ending, the final chapter where he rode off into the sunset with his young girlfriend and half my assets, leaving me to pick up the pieces of my little art hobby. Instead, it had been a beginning. Not just for me, but for every woman who heard my story and realized she deserved better than someone else's midlife crisis. I kept that original text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far careful planning could take you. Below it hung a small plaque that read, "Success is the best revenge." But the real success wasn't Marcus's downfall. It was the empire I'd built while he was busy underestimating me. Every new gallery location, every artist whose career we launched, every young entrepreneur who learned to protect their assets because of my story, that was the true victory. As the anniversary celebration wound down, I made my way through the gallery one last time, checking on the artwork, ensuring everything was secure for the night. This ritual had remained unchanged since my very first day in business 8 years ago. The same attention to detail, the same methodical approach that had saved me when Marcus tried to destroy everything I'd built. My phone buzzed with a notification, and for just a moment, muscle memory made me tense. But it wasn't another cruel message from my ex-husband. It was a text from Devin, the young artist whose opening had been interrupted by Marcus's dramatic exit 5 years ago. "Zara, just wanted you to know, the Smithsonian wants to acquire 3 pieces from my Generational Wealth series. The same paintings that were hanging the night your ex tried to end your story. Thought you should know you helped create something permanent that night." I smiled, remembering that evening, the calm I'd felt reading Marcus's text, the certainty that his arrogance would be his downfall, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I was 10 steps ahead of his desperate plan. Standing in my gallery, surrounded by the legacy I'd built and protected, I realized that Marcus had actually given me a gift that night. Not the cruel words or the financial betrayal, but the opportunity to prove, to myself and to everyone watching, that I was stronger than he'd ever imagined. His text message had asked me not to embarrass myself trying to stop him. Instead, I'd embarrassed him by being smarter, more prepared, and ultimately more successful than he'd ever dreamed possible. I turned off the gallery lights and locked the door, the same ritual I'd performed thousands of times before. But tonight felt different. Not like an ending, but like a beginning. Tomorrow would bring new artists to discover, new opportunities to explore, new ways to grow the empire that Marcus had tried to claim and failed to understand. My phone buzzed once more as I walked to my car. This time it was a message from a young entrepreneur I'd mentored, sending a photo of her first business loan approval. "Thank you for teaching me that preparation isn't paranoia," she'd written. "Following your advice saved my company when my partner tried to push me out." That's when I knew the real impact of my story. It wasn't about one woman's divorce or one man's arrogance. It was about changing the conversation around preparation, about teaching people, especially women, that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's smart. Marcus had tried to write my ending with that text message about Dubai and his freedom fee. Instead, he'd given me the opening chapter of the most successful period of my life. As I drove home through Atlanta's Arts District, past the second gallery location we'd opened last year, I thought about that night 5 years ago when I'd stood reading his cruel message while surrounded by art about generational wealth and legacy. I'd built something that would last long after his midlife crisis became a cautionary tale. Something that employed dozens of people, launched hundreds of careers, and inspired thousands of women to protect what they'd worked so hard to create. The best revenge I'd learned isn't getting even. It's getting better. It's building something so successful, so lasting, so undeniably valuable that the person who tried to diminish you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your success story. 5 years later, Marcus was still living with his mother, still blaming everyone else for his problems, still trying to rewrite history to make himself the victim. And I was still here, still building, still growing, still proving every single day that his biggest mistake wasn't cheating on me or stealing from me or trying to humiliate me. His biggest mistake was underestimating me. What would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories where the underestimated become unstoppable. Because sometimes, the most powerful response to betrayal isn't anger or revenge. It's simply refusing to let someone else's failures define your future. Thanks for joining me for this journey. Remember, preparation isn't paranoia, documentation isn't distrust, and protecting what you've built isn't selfish, it's survival. Until next time, keep building something worth protecting.